I'm Vincent, and I'll be your host for the night. Welcome to our spooky season special night of terror and suspense. Brace yourself for a spine-chilling Halloween creepypasta experience like no other. Viewer discretion is advised. It was an ordinary autumn day when I stumbled upon the yard sale that would change my life. The air was crisp, and the scent of fallen leaves filled the neighborhood. As I wandered among the mismatched furniture and old trinkets, my eyes were drawn to a peculiar mask resting on a weathered table. It was an unsettling creation, molded from glossy rubbery plastic, its expression frozen in a sinister grin, and hollow eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. Approaching the elderly woman overseeing the sale, I inquired about the mask. It was a sinister-looking creature with elongated horns and a twisted grin, its eyes hollow voids that seemed to pierce through my soul. Despite its eerie appearance, I was drawn to it, an inexplicable fascination settling in my bones. The elderly woman selling it noticed my interest. "Ah, that mask. It's said to be cursed, you know. They say it brings out the darkness in people," she warned, her voice trembling with an unsettling mixture of fear and excitement. Despite her hesitance, she agreed to part with it. Taking my purchase home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had invited something unknown into my life. Despite my apprehension, I decided to incorporate the mask into my Halloween costume, thinking it would make for a chilling addition to the spooky night. Determined to enjoy the night, I accompanied my friends to a Halloween party. That's when I tried to remove the mask. It clung to my skin as if fused with my face. Panic set in. I pulled and tugged, desperate to free myself, but the mask remained steadfast, its plastic grin mocking my futile attempts to remove it. My pleas for help were drowned out by the festivities around me, my friends oblivious to my silent distress. In a desperate bid to escape its grasp, I locked myself in the bathroom, staring at my reflection in horror. The mask, once a separate entity, now seemed fused with my skin, its plastic contours melded with my features. And so, I stood before the mirror, my eyes vacant, my expression hollow. The plastic mask, once a separate entity, now felt like a part of my very being. It grinned back at me, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent intelligence. I was trapped, my identity consumed by the sinister creation. I had become the embodiment of Halloween's darkest nightmares, a living, breathing manifestation of fear. The sun was sinking low on the horizon, casting long, eerie shadows through the dense forest that had swallowed us whole. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled through the underbrush, my breath visible in the crisp evening air. We were lost, disoriented in this labyrinth of trees and darkness, and panic was beginning to creep in. We were 5 friends, Mark, Sarah, Jake, Lisa, and myself, Alex. We had ventured into the woods for what was meant to be a simple camping trip, a weekend escape from the hustle and bustle of our daily lives. But somewhere along the way, our trail had vanished, and we found ourselves hopelessly turned around. The fading light left us with no choice but to set up camp where we were, near a small clearing in the woods. We pitched our tents and huddled around a meager campfire, hoping to ward off the encroaching darkness. We had food and supplies to last a few days, but our situation was growing dire. That's when we heard it, the distant sound of an engine rumbling through the forest. We exchanged hopeful glances, and our spirits lifted. Perhaps we weren't as lost as we thought. The source of the noise soon became clear as an old, battered pickup truck emerged from the trees. It came to a stop a few feet from our campsite, and 2 men stepped out. They were brothers, we learned, by the names of Isaac and Elijah. They looked to be in their late 40s with wild, unkempt beards and tattered clothes. Despite their rugged appearance, their eyes held a warmth that put us at ease. "We couldn't help but overhear that you folks are lost," Isaac said with a friendly smile. "We live not too far from here, and we'd be happy to give you shelter for the night. In exchange, maybe you could help us with a few chores on the farm." The offer seemed too good to refuse, and our grumbling stomachs made the decision even easier. We agreed, and the brothers guided us through the forest to their farmhouse. It was a rustic, weathered structure that seemed to have weathered many seasons. The scent of home-cooked food wafted through the air as we approached. Once inside, we were welcomed by a hearty feast laid out on a long wooden table. Our exhaustion and hunger overwhelmed our initial unease. We dug into the meal, grateful for the brothers' hospitality. As we ate, I couldn't help but notice something odd. The atmosphere in the farmhouse seemed tense, as if there was an unspoken secret hanging in the air. The brothers were friendly, but there was an unsettling undercurrent to their demeanor. I excused myself from the table to use the restroom, and as I made my way down the narrow hallway, I noticed a faint trail of dark, sticky liquid leading to a partially closed door. My heart sank, and a sense of dread washed over me. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open, and my worst fears were realized. The room beyond was a grisly scene, a makeshift butcher's shop. Hooks hung from the ceiling, and tools of the trade were scattered across a blood-stained table. The floor was slick with gore. And then, I saw it. My friend Jake's backpack, discarded on the floor in a pool of crimson. Panic surged through me as I realized he was missing, and the pieces of the puzzle fell into place with horrifying clarity. I rushed back to the dining room, my voice trembling as I confronted the brothers. "Where is Jake?" I demanded, my eyes locked onto theirs. Isaac and Elijah exchanged a glance, their smiles faltering. "Jake had to leave unexpectedly," Isaac replied, his voice wavering. I knew they were lying, and panic gave way to fury. "Don't lie to me! I saw what's in that room. Where is he?" In an instant, the brothers' demeanor shifted. Their smiles twisted into malevolent grins, and their eyes gleamed with madness. It was as if a mask had been ripped away, revealing the true horrors that lurked beneath. "We don't take kindly to snoops," Elijah snarled, lunging toward me. I barely had time to react before the room erupted into chaos. My friends and I fought desperately against the brothers and their family, who had emerged from the shadows. It was a brutal struggle, and the farmhouse seemed to close in around us, trapping us in a nightmare. As the fight raged on, I caught glimpses of my friends, bloodied and battered, as they fought for their lives. It was a gruesome battle, and I knew that escape was our only hope. With all the strength I could muster, I managed to break free from the farmhouse. The night air was cold and unforgiving, but I stumbled through the darkness, the sounds of the struggle behind me growing fainter with each step. My heart pounded in my chest as I ran through the woods, the horrors of that farmhouse haunting my every thought. I knew I was the only one left, the sole survivor of our ill-fated camping trip. I stumbled upon a road and flagged down a passing car, babbling incoherently about the nightmare I had just endured. The police were called, and they descended on the farmhouse in force. What they found was a scene of unspeakable horror, a house of cannibals, a family that had been feasting on the flesh of their victims for years. My friends were gone, their fates sealed in that gruesome place. The brothers, Isaac and Elijah, were taken into custody, their madness on full display as they laughed and gibbered about their meals. They were locked away, but their sinister legacy would forever haunt my nightmares. I survived that night, but the scars of what I witnessed will never heal. The woods that had once represented freedom and adventure had become a nightmarish realm of terror and death. And the memory of my friends, lost to the madness of the cannibal brothers, would haunt me for the rest of my days. I've always been afraid of the dark, just like any other kid. But what I didn't know was that my fear was about to become more than just a child's nightmare. It was about to become my reality. This is the story of the demon that lived under my bed. Growing up, I had heard the stories about the monster under the bed from my friends and older siblings. They were just stories, or so I thought. My parents had always reassured me that there was nothing to be afraid of, that monsters weren't real. Little did they know there was something under my bed, something very real, very malevolent. It started one night when I was about 7 years old. I had just finished reading my favorite bedtime story and turned off the light, plunging my room into darkness. As I lay there, tucked under my blankets, my imagination started to run wild. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me, something sinister and unseen. I pulled the covers up to my chin, paralyzed with fear, my eyes darting around the room. That's when I felt it. A cold, clammy hand brush against my ankle. I gasped, my heart racing as I looked down to see nothing but the darkness. I tried to convince myself that it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. Night after night, the encounters continued. The sensation of icy fingers grazing my skin, the eerie whispers that seemed to come from nowhere, and the feeling of an unseen presence lurking just beneath my bed. It became clear that whatever was under there was not content with simply scaring me. It wanted something more. One particular night, I awoke to find the room shrouded in an impenetrable darkness. I could hear my parents' soft snores from the next room, but it was as if the rest of the world had ceased to exist. I knew I wasn't alone. I felt the familiar sensation of a cold hand wrapping around my ankle. But this time, it was different. This time, the grip was firm, unyielding, and it began to pull me toward the edge of the bed. Panic surged through my veins as I desperately tried to resist, but it was no use. I was being dragged under the bed, into the abyss that lay beneath. As I descended, the world around me twisted and contorted. It was as if I was falling through a tunnel of nightmares. My room vanished, replaced by a realm of darkness and shadows. The sensation of being pulled deeper and deeper into this nightmarish void was overwhelming, and I couldn't fight it any longer. Finally, I found myself in a place that was unlike anything I had ever seen. It was a desolate land of perpetual darkness, where the sky was a deep, inky black, and the ground was made of shifting shadows. The air was heavy with a sense of dread, and the only sound was a haunting, whispered chorus that seemed to come from all directions at once. As I stood there, trembling and disoriented, I realized that I was not alone. Figures began to emerge from the darkness, grotesque and twisted beings that moved with an unnatural grace. They were the shadow people, and they surrounded me, their eyes gleaming with malevolence. I don't know how long I was trapped in that place, but it felt like an eternity. The shadow people tormented me, whispering their sinister secrets and tormenting my every waking moment. The demon watched over me, its presence a constant reminder of my powerlessness. And then, one day, as suddenly as I had been taken, I was returned. I found myself lying in my own bed, back in my own room, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew that it wasn't over, that the demon still lurked beneath my bed, waiting for the next opportunity to drag me back into its nightmarish realm. I've tried to tell others about what happened to me, but no one believes me. They think it's just the imagination of a child, a nightmare that I can't escape. But I know the truth, and I can still feel the cold, clammy hand on my ankle, the whispered voices in the darkness, and the malevolent presence that lurks just beneath my bed, waiting for its next victim. In a small, quiet town, nestled deep within a valley, there lived a man named Dr. Slime. He was a mysterious figure, known to the townsfolk as the reclusive inventor who dwelled in a dilapidated old house on the outskirts of town. Dr. Slime's peculiar creations had both fascinated and unnerved the residents for years. Dr. Slime's real name was Edward Bartholomew, but the townspeople had given him the moniker Dr. Slime due to his strange and unsettling hobby. You see, Dr. Slime had an extraordinary talent for creating a unique type of slime in his basement. This was not just any kind of slime. It was a remarkable substance that could mend potholes in the town's roads and even be used in construction to build sturdy houses. At first, the townsfolk couldn't believe their luck. The roads had always been plagued with potholes, and the constant need for repairs had strained the town's resources. Dr. Slime's invention seemed like a godsend, and he became a local hero. His shop, Slime's Wonders, quickly became the go-to place for this miraculous slime, which he marketed as pavement putty. Children adored pavement putty. They would come to Dr. Slime's shop after school, giggling and buying small containers of the sticky substance. Little did they know that beneath its helpful exterior, the slime concealed a dark and sinister secret. As Dr. Slime continued to refine his creation, the slime began to take on a mind of its own when it grew to a certain size. No one knew the secret behind this peculiar transformation, but the rumors began to circulate throughout the town. Some claimed to have seen the slime pulsating, as if it were alive, while others swore they heard eerie whispers coming from Dr. Slime's basement laboratory. One evening, a group of curious children decided to investigate the source of these unsettling rumors. Armed with flashlights and their boundless curiosity, they sneaked into Dr. Slime's basement, the entrance concealed beneath an old, creaking trapdoor. Inside the dimly lit laboratory, they found vats of pavement putty in various stages of development. The room was filled with an eerie green glow, and the slime seemed to writhe with a sinister intent. As the children ventured deeper, they discovered a horrifying sight. A massive, pulsating blob of slime, larger than any they had ever seen. Before they could react, the massive blob of slime surged to life, tendrils lashing out to ensnare the children. Panic and terror filled their eyes as they realized the true nature of Dr. Slime's creation. The slime, once it grew large enough, had the power to take control of those it touched, pulling them into its gelatinous depths, where they disappeared without a trace. Desperate screams echoed through the basement as the children fought to escape the insidious grasp of the malevolent slime. Dr. Slime himself emerged from the shadows, his eyes filled with a manic glee as he watched his creation claim its victims. The parents of the missing children were devastated, their hearts heavy with grief and confusion. Each night, they gathered together in whispered huddles, searching for answers and holding on to the faintest glimmer of hope that their beloved sons and daughters might one day return. Dr. Slime's once thriving shop became a place of dread, its windows boarded up and its door chained shut. But as the days turned to weeks and the weeks to months, the townsfolk couldn't escape the gnawing suspicion that something even more sinister was at play. Rumors of children's laughter echoing faintly from the woods near Dr. Slime's home gave rise to chilling tales of spectral voices calling out for help. Then, one moonless night, a mother named Margaret, her heart heavy with despair, decided to confront Dr. Slime head-on. Armed with a flickering lantern and a steely determination, she ventured deep into the dark forest that surrounded his home. She followed the faint, eerie sounds that seemed to lead her to the very heart of the mystery. Margaret's journey took her through twisted trees and thickets, the shadows closing in around her, and the air growing colder with each step. Finally, she arrived at an eerie clearing, where the trees seemed to part to reveal a sight that chilled her to her core. In the center of the clearing stood an enormous, grotesque mass of Dr. Slime's putty. It pulsated and writhed, a grotesque parody of life, its surface covered in small, childlike faces, frozen in expressions of fear and anguish. The voices of the lost children seemed to emanate from the putty itself, their spectral pleas for release echoing through the night. Margaret knew that she had to confront the monstrosity before her, to free the souls of the children trapped within. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small container of putty, which she had secretly acquired from Slime's wonders. With trembling hands, she molded it into a sphere and tossed it into the grotesque mass. As the putty made contact, a brilliant, blinding light erupted, and the grotesque mass of putty shrieked in agony. The childlike faces contorted in pain before vanishing into the blinding light, one by one. Margaret could hear the voices of the children growing fainter and fainter until they finally faded away, leaving behind only an eerie silence. With a heavy heart, Margaret realized that she had freed the lost children's souls, but their physical forms were lost forever. The curse of Dr. Slime's sinister putty had been broken, but at a harrowing cost. The townsfolk never spoke of the horrors that had transpired in that dark forest, and the legend of Dr. Slime and his malevolent putty lived on as a cautionary tale. The town would forever bear the scars of its tragic past, a town forever changed by a man who had harnessed both miracles and nightmares in his quest for innovation. And as for Dr. Slime himself, he vanished into the shadows, leaving behind only a haunting legacy of mystery and terror. The town would always wonder if he had met a fate as grim as the secrets he had kept in the depths of his basement laboratory. In the age of relentless telemarketers and automated robocalls, most people have fantasized about getting revenge on those who disturb the peace and quiet of their lives. But what if one such prank caller found themselves in a nightmarish world of their own making, hunted by a covert agency that targeted those who didn't respect the sanctity of the telephone? Meet Alex Jenkins, an ordinary guy with an extraordinary talent for pulling off epic prank phone calls. His friends marveled at his ability to mimic voices, create elaborate scenarios, and leave their unsuspecting victims in fits of laughter, confusion, or anger. For years, Alex's pranks were the stuff of local legend, but little did he know that his antics had drawn the attention of an organization shrouded in mystery, the Phone Guardians. It all began on a rainy evening when Alex decided to prank his unsuspecting neighbor, Mrs. Granger. The elderly woman had a reputation for being a bit of a grouch, and Alex couldn't resist the temptation. With his voice disguised as a famous celebrity, he called her, pretending to be her favorite actor, asking for gardening advice. The call was a resounding success. Mrs. Granger laughed so hard that she forgot her woes for the night. But as the days passed, something strange began to happen. Alex noticed that his neighbors and friends were treating him differently. Conversations were cut short when he entered a room, and his closest buddies seemed distant. It was as if he had become invisible. One night, as Alex sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, the phone rang. Caller ID displayed unknown. A distorted voice on the other end spoke, "Mr. Jenkins, we've been monitoring your activities closely." Alex's heart raced, his prank calling days flashing before his eyes. "Who is this? What do you want?" The voice continued, "We are the Phone Guardians, an organization dedicated to preserving the sanctity of the telephone. Prank callers like you disrupt the lives of innocent people. It's time you faced the consequences of your actions." Before Alex could respond, the call abruptly ended. Panic welled up inside him as he wondered who these mysterious phone guardians were and what they intended to do. The next morning, Alex's world crumbled. His identity seemed to vanish overnight. His driver's license, passport, and even his birth certificate were gone. His bank accounts were empty, his social media profiles erased, and his friends and family acted as if they'd never known him. It was as though he had become a ghost. Desperate and terrified, Alex embarked on a quest to uncover the truth about the phone guardians and regain his identity. He dug into every available resource, scouring the internet for any clues that could lead him to them. But it was as if they didn't exist, leaving behind only whispers and rumors. Weeks turned into months as Alex became a recluse, haunted by the feeling of being watched. He would often hear distorted voices on the other end of his phone, taunting him, reminding him of his past transgressions. Sleepless nights became the norm as paranoia gnawed at his sanity. One evening, Alex received a call from an unknown number. Tentatively, he answered. The distorted voice of the phone guardian spoke once more. "Mr. Jenkins, your time is running out. You must make amends for your actions. Your salvation lies in one final epic prank call." The organization's demand was simple but chilling. They had chosen Alex's next target, a wealthy businessman named Arthur Winston, notorious for his arrogance and ruthless dealings. The plan was to humiliate Winston in front of a crowd of his peers and colleagues, exposing his darkest secrets. Alex had no choice but to comply. With the help of his remaining prank-calling equipment, he concocted an elaborate ruse. Disguised as a reporter from a prestigious magazine, he arranged a fake interview with Winston at a luxurious gala. The night arrived, as Alex prepared to execute the prank that could determine his fate. His heart pounded like a drum as he approached Winston and began the interview. He asked questions that led the businessman down a treacherous path, revealing his unethical practices and hidden scandals. The room fell into silence as the truth unfolded, and Winston's face turned crimson with humiliation. Alex had succeeded in his task, and the crowd erupted in shock and disbelief. But as he prepared to make his exit, he felt a chilling presence behind him. Turning around, Alex came face to face with a man in a dark suit, a phone guardian emblem gleaming on his lapel. "You've done well," the man said, his voice devoid of distortion. "What do you want from me?" Alex stammered. The phone guardian revealed their true purpose. "We do not seek to destroy you, Mr. Jenkins, but to reform you. You have learned the importance of respecting the phone, and now you shall join our ranks." With that, the phone guardian extended a hand toward Alex, who hesitated for a moment before accepting it. In that instant, his past identity was restored, and he became a member of the enigmatic organization tasked with maintaining the sanctity of the telephone. From that day forward, Alex Jenkins walked a fine line between the world of prank calling and the secret realm of the phone guardians. He used his talents not to disrupt lives but to expose corruption and protect the innocent. The phone had transformed him from a prankster into a guardian of the communication that connected us all. And as for the true nature of the phone guardians, that remained shrouded in mystery, known only to those who had experienced the consequences of their actions and been granted a second chance to make amends. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the endless fields of corn and wheat, I sat on the creaky porch of our farmhouse, contemplating the simple life we led out in the sticks of America. The rhythmic chirping of crickets and the distant howling of coyotes were the only sounds that broke the silence of the countryside. It was peaceful, the way it always had been. My family, consisting of my parents, John and Mary, and my younger sister, Emily, had owned this farm for generations. It was our little slice of heaven, far away from the hustle and bustle of the city. We grew our own food, tended to our livestock, and reveled in the quiet isolation. But that night, everything was about to change. The air grew strangely still, and an eerie green glow began to circle the fields. My heart pounded as I noticed strange, disc-shaped objects hovering above our cows. Panic set in as beams of light shot down from the UFOs, zapping the unsuspecting cattle. Some were thrown into the air, their terrified moos echoing through the night, while others simply exploded into a cloud of smoke and ash. The once tranquil farm had turned into a chaotic nightmare. "Mom, Dad, Emily," I screamed, my voice quivering with fear. I rushed toward the barn, hoping to find my family. As I reached the entrance, I saw them huddled together in terror, watching the horrifying spectacle outside. "We need to get inside now," my father yelled, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the house. We ran as fast as our legs could carry us, our hearts racing with every step. We made it inside just in time to hear a deafening explosion. The aliens had blown the roof off the barn, sending debris and flames into the night sky. We huddled in the living room, trembling as we listened to the alien spacecrafts circling above our home. Hours passed, and the terror outside showed no signs of abating. We tried calling the police, but the lines were dead. The electricity had been cut, plunging our farmhouse into darkness. The isolation that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a prison. But then, a glimmer of hope appeared on the horizon. The distant rumble of military vehicles grew louder, and soon, the ground shook as a convoy of tanks and soldiers rolled onto our property. The army had arrived. Armed with heavy weaponry, they confronted the extraterrestrial menace. The night sky erupted into a fierce battle, with the soldiers firing missiles at the UFOs. Brilliant flashes of light and deafening explosions filled the air, painting a surreal and terrifying scene. The aliens retaliated with their advanced technology, firing beams of energy that seemed unstoppable. The farmhouse shook as one of the beams struck nearby, causing the walls to tremble and windows to shatter. Our family cowered in the corner, praying for safety. But just when all hope seemed lost, a group of fighter jets soared overhead, launching a final assault on the UFOs. Explosions blossomed in the night sky as the alien ships were obliterated one by one. The remaining UFOs fled, vanishing into the darkness from whence they came. With the threat gone, the soldiers rushed to our aid, helping us out of the damaged farmhouse. We were shaken and battered, but alive. In the aftermath of that terrifying night, our farm became a symbol of resilience and survival. It was a Halloween tale we would tell for generations, of the night the unknown came to the sticks of America, and how we stood together against the forces from beyond the stars. As I sit on the porch once more, looking out at the now peaceful fields, I can't help but wonder if the aliens will ever return. But for now, our little farmhouse remains a sanctuary in the heart of the sticks, where the stars in the sky hold secrets we may never fully understand. I've always been drawn to the open road, the feeling of freedom that comes with every mile traveled. So, when I found myself stranded on a desolate stretch of Highway 1 dark, stormy night, my instincts kicked in. I decided to take my chances and hitchhike. Little did I know that my choice would lead to an encounter with a hitchhiker unlike any I could have imagined. It was a stormy evening, rain pouring down in sheets, and thunder echoing through the empty landscape. My car had broken down miles away from the nearest town, leaving me alone and soaked to the bone. I stood on the side of the road, my thumb out, hoping to catch a ride from a passing stranger. After what felt like an eternity, a car finally pulled over, its headlights cutting through the rain and darkness. I approached the vehicle, my gratitude outweighing my unease. The driver's side window rolled down, revealing the face of a middle-aged man with grizzled hair and piercing blue eyes. "Need a lift, kid?" he asked, his voice low and gruff. Relief washed over me as I nodded and climbed into the passenger seat. I told him my destination, and he assured me that it was along his route. As we drove, conversation flowed easily between us. He introduced himself as Sam and shared stories of his own adventures on the road. Sam's tales were captivating, filled with intrigue and danger. He spoke of abandoned towns, mysterious hitchhikers, and haunted highways. I couldn't help but be drawn into his stories, feeling a strange connection with this stranger who had come to my rescue. As the miles passed, I noticed something odd. The rain had stopped, the storm dissipating as quickly as it had arrived. The road ahead seemed different too, older, as if we had traveled back in time. I glanced at the clock on the dashboard, but it was frozen at 11:59 p.m., the second hand refusing to move. "Something wrong with the clock?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Sam's eyes flicked to the clock, and a sly smile crossed his lips. "Oh, don't mind that. Time has a way of playing tricks out here on the road." Unease gnawed at the edges of my mind, but I dismissed it as my imagination running wild. After all, Sam's stories had been filled with the supernatural and unexplainable. It was easy to get caught up in the mystery of it all. We continued to drive through the night, the world outside growing darker and more desolate. The landscape had shifted again, this time into a barren wasteland of twisted trees and foreboding shadows. I had no idea where we were, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As we drove deeper into the night, Sam's demeanor began to change. His friendly banter gave way to an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional eerie chuckle. His eyes, once warm and inviting, now gleamed with an unsettling hunger. I tried to make small talk, to steer the conversation away from the growing sense of dread that had settled over us, but Sam's responses grew increasingly cryptic. He spoke of hidden truths and the power of the road, his words weaving a sinister tapestry of mystery and danger. I began to fear for my safety, wondering if I had made a grave mistake by accepting a ride from this stranger. But as I contemplated my options, Sam suddenly veered off the road and onto a narrow, winding path that seemed to appear out of nowhere. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice trembling. Sam didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the road ahead as if in a trance. The path led us deeper into the darkness, the trees closing in around us like silent sentinels. I felt a growing sense of claustrophobia, as if the very forest itself was closing in on us. And then, I saw them. Figures standing in the shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. They were like phantoms, half human, half something else, and they seemed to beckon us forward with outstretched arms. Panic coursed through my veins as I realized that we were not alone on this desolate path. I turned to Sam, desperate for answers, but he was no longer the man who had picked me up on the side of the road. His face had transformed into a grotesque mask, his eyes empty, voids of darkness. "Welcome to the crossroads," he said, his voice echoing with a sinister resonance. "A place where choices are made and fates are sealed." I didn't know what he meant, but I knew that I had to get out of the car and away from this nightmarish scene. I unbuckled my seatbelt and tried to open the door, but it was locked, as if fused shut by some unseen force. Desperation set in as I struggled to escape, but it was no use. The figures in the shadows drew closer, their bony fingers reaching out to touch me. I could feel their icy grip on my skin, pulling me closer to the darkness. As the figures closed in, I realized the terrible truth. I had become a part of Sam's collection, just another lost soul on this haunted highway. And as the darkness swallowed me whole, I couldn't help but wonder how many others had met the same fate, their stories lost to the unforgiving road that stretched on into eternity.